Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, the space for entrepreneurs on a quest for unwavering certainty and purpose. I'm your host, Lauren, and each episode is a compass guiding you through authentic conversations, unraveling the mysteries of your human design chart, and offering tools from the remarkable guest. Join me as we embark on a journey to manifest greatness and create a life aligned with our deepest purpose. This is the space where misfits find their enlightenment. Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have Alison. She is an archetypal website designer. Welcome, Alison. I'm so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Amazing to be here. Yay.
Before we get started, can you kind of explain to the listeners kind of where you are at in your journey right now and how you become this archetypal website designer?
Sure. So I am from New Zealand. So I'm from the Southern Hemisphere. I was born in New Zealand and I'm living in Australia at the moment. So my background or my cultural background is one of the First Nations people in New Zealand. And from this kind of background that I have, we, in a way, our family, I've got a very large family, by the way, there's lots of my mum and dad's side. We were kind of intrinsically brought up with this, some people may say magical life, some like charmed life, but like knowing that there is an innate kind of intelligence with everyone and everything, including animals, plants, trees, and so forth like that. When I was little, I used to see fairies and things like that and used to play with them when I was little. I was around animals quite a lot. I actually grew up by myself almost because there's such a big age difference between myself and my older siblings. And so because of that, I spent a lot of time alone. And so I wandered a lot when I was a little kid. I was pretty resourceful when I was a little kid. We grew up on a massive farm. And I would just wander around all the time. And so we were very intimately connected with nature. And then I kind of grew up and, we forget sometimes about the magic of our childhood and, did things and worked in hospitality and moved overseas a couple of times. And then when I went back home, when my cousin passed away, she was the same age as we were, a little bit younger. She was about 25. It was kind of one of those life reset moments where you're like, what are you going to do? Kind of thing. And I stumbled across, at that stage, flower essences from New Zealand. And so I started taking them and I never really thought anything. And then I moved to Melbourne. And a couple of years later from that, I actually stumbled across a website. It pretty much just opened in front of me. And it was the first light flower essences of New Zealand, but it was in a medicine woman capacity. So it was a program. And one of those things where it's like the thunderbolt kind of comes and it's like, you have to do this. And that's when I started studying with what was it called? The Medicine Woman School of Shamanic and Esoteric Studies, based in New Zealand. And I'm on I think it's about my 8th year now of working with the essences. So they are considered, let me see. So shamanism as like an indigenous practice was essentially somewhere where you would undergo rites of passage. You would generally go out in nature. You may go on vision quests and so forth like that. You'd just be, left out to your own devices, maybe for 3, 4, 5 days, fend for yourself kind of thing. See what happens out in the world. You may or may not take hallucinogenic medicine, plant medicine, and so forth like that to induce this kind of alternate consciousness or states of consciousness in which to pierce through to the spirit world. A shaman or a shamaness or a medicine woman essentially is someone who is a spirit walker. So they walk in between worlds. And the worlds are the upper world, the middle world, which is kind of our waking reality, and the lower world, which is like the subconscious. And so you're basically a mediator between those places and spaces and come into contact with lots of different really interesting things. I have seen a lot of really interesting different things when I've been walking in these different worlds. And the teacher plants that I was using in New Zealand, they are essentially called whakahirahira plants, which are like warrior plants of the plant kingdom. And so they kind of know their stuff. And I've worked with, I think I'm up to about the 86th one, I think, at the moment. And what we generally do is there is a teacher plant, and that teacher plant teaches you a specific rite of passage. And we work with them in a lunar cycle. So there's like an introduction phase where you're working together, getting to know each other. There's the second phase, which is like from the first quarter, and you're working with them to kind of figure out, like, what intelligence do you have to offer me? What kind of wisdom and guidance? And then the third part, which is around the full moon, is when you undertake a rite of passage. So essentially, it's a point in time where there is a ego death that occurs, or some type of death, or I wouldn't say suffering, but there's something that you must let go in order to receive. And then the last component of it is essentially transpersonal in nature. So you're sending all of the energy out into the world, and then you close with like a ceremony, and then the new cycle starts again with another teacher plant. So there's a lot of different, I guess, skill acquisition or skills that I've acquired through those programs and working with those teacher plants. They are being pretty profound and life-changing for me. I mean, I've read my journals from when I very first started, and I am amazed by that version of me that I was reading, and I was like, wow, you're scattered, like you feel so lost inside. And it's such a different, it's night and day, essentially, the transformation that's occurred slowly and incrementally over time. And I would not be where I am today without them, definitely. They've saved me through and helped me through many challenging time frame, being a woman like in the 21st century kind of thing. So yeah, I've been very grateful for working with them, and I'm still working with them at the moment. Actually, I just started a new program, which has been really cool. So yeah, it's life changing and life affirming, and it makes you realize the complete, utter, like interconnected nature of everything and everyone in the world through time and space. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of a little bit of a condensed version of it all. But yeah, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say because the shaman, so the rights that I received were the Moon Moonike, and I do know that there's different, like, I don't want to call them tribes, but I'm gonna call them
Lineages,
tribes.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't want to say, I don't know if tribe is the right word because I don't think it is, but I feel like it's all of the same. A couple of my clients had said, I want to do the shamanic journey or like do shamanism because I mean that
Mm-hmm.
depends on like where you are, where you would do it. But I
Yes,
don't
so there's
take
different
holistic.
tones or flavors, I guess, of
Yeah,
shamanism, like as a
yeah,
whole umbrella term.
yes,
Shamanism could be broadly defined as almost earth, like earth-based-ish
yeah,
magic, or kind of wisdom or intelligence.
yeah,
But essentially it's a spirit walker. So it's somebody that walks between worlds,
right,
and is very adept and capable, and can do that without harm to themselves and the other creatures that are in those worlds, so to
right,
speak. So
yeah.
there's a symbiotic kind of harmonious but also respectful relationship that gets created over time.
Yeah. I always call myself now, not that I've always been that person that connects with nature, but now I have more awareness. I have like I feel like Snow White. All of the animals come to me now.
Oh, I
Like the
know
monkeys
the
come to
bird
me.
life is
Like
amazing.
I feel like I feel like since I've been placed with the rights of, since I guess it's been since May. It was very easy for me personally. I did do it with one of my friends, but it was
Mhm.
very easy for me to get into that state, be able to connect with like just different, but I feel like I feel like I had more practice than the other girl because she, gets the downloads, she can see the visions and all that stuff. But I feel like ever since I was a baby, I could talk to animals. I
Oh
could,
yeah.
like I could do all of that stuff. And now it's just more, I feel like my abilities are more like all my psychic abilities are very heightened. Like even somebody puts on social media, like, you should smell this. It's like, oh, I can smell what it smells like. It's just like those type of like, I'm like, sometimes you're like, I didn't want that psychic ability, like to smell things, but it's actually kept me safe during times that I needed. Like if I was blocking off, the visions, I was blocking off
Mhm.
the hearing, I was blocking off all this stuff. And it was like the only sense that, spirit could be like, can you please listen? You're not safe right now, So yeah, I love that, how you explain that, because I feel like when people hear about shamanism, they're like, oh, that's just like witchcraft. And I'm like, well, I mean, I'm not saying it.
Yeah, I mean, witchcraft is kind of, and this is, I think, also the challenging aspect that we have in the 21st century
Yeah,
is there is a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about these spiritual concepts, these philosophies, or
yeah,
ways of being, but there's not much understanding about what the definition of it and what it actually really means when you talk about it.
right.
And so I think even like if you talk about Wiccan, like, people may define Wiccan something different, witchcraft something different. Sorcery is very different from magic.
Yeah,
And so there's this thing where we talk about a lot of things, but I think something that's really important when we talk about these things is actually to have a working definition of what we mean about it. Because then
right.
that helps to other people, to either articulate, is this what we're kind of talking about? Or is it something different? Are we coming at it from a different perspective and find some common ground and understanding? From what I can understand about like the research on shamanism, or that word shaman essentially is from kind of like the northern Arctic Circle region around like Russia, and a lot of the indigenous cultural groupings of Russia and stuff like that. And that's where it's kind of come from, and it's come down through that language and through that history and understanding. And then obviously we've got the different, I guess, indigenous flavors and contexts to it, which is almost like different languages of shamanism. Like
Yeah,
you've got different understanding. For example, the branch of shamanism that I worked with and underwent the rites of passage with is working entirely with teacher plants. So it's not actually a person or a man or a woman, it's actually the teachers in nature, and that's who I worked with. Whereas if you're talking about potentially some of the other locations like Southeast Asia, is that they will use like psychotropics or hallucinogenics in order to induce that state. And that was very much part of I wouldn't say the old ways, but some of the ways in which people were walked through that path was actually to undergo things like ayahuasca and peyote and stuff like that to actually induce that state. Whereas now within the 21st century, like we can actually undertake that without having to go through that kind of experience, and it's somewhat safer.
yes.
Um, yeah, it's
Yeah,
just it's fascinating, super fascinating.
yeah. I was going to say a couple actually that I love that you said that, because a couple people actually, when they had brought this question to me, they're like, I don't have to take the hallucinogenics, do I? And I was like, to me, I was like, I never have. Like, I never had done any of that to kind of change my consciousness or change the state of like to me to get there. But then I realized, oh, okay, so like that whole part of the ego death, and that has to kind of happen first, or you're never going to get there. Your ego is never going to allow you to get there. Not that it's bad, it just means that's simply to keep you safe. It's like, what is she doing?
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
changing
yeah.
her consciousness. I don't like this. This is not
It's a
safe, but it's
gatekeeper. Like your ego is a gatekeeper essentially, and
yeah,
it's a gatekeeper
yeah,
to the mysteries, kind of, of the mysteries in your mind and such,
yes,
and
yeah,
accessing those alternate states of consciousness. And when you use psychotropic drugs or even like
yeah,
mushrooms or hallucinogenics, it actually breaks that kind of gatekeeper down so that the doors are open a little bit easier. But in saying that, it can also invite in other elements that one needs to deal with in that state, while they may not necessarily have the right skills and abilities in order to do that. So that's why a lot of people sometimes get, I guess, scared or frightened, or when they go
yeah.
through that experience, because it is completely individual, taking stuff like that. And
Oh yeah,
it can help. It obviously helps being around someone that knows what they're doing. But
yes,
that's not necessary anymore in the new kind of like, the new paradigm, the new age, the Aquarian age. That was part of the Piscean age of working with shamanism and working with psychotropic plants and stuff like that. Like that
yeah,
was the old way or the old cycle. It's the new cycle now, so it's slightly different.
Yeah, yeah. When I always felt like, and I feel like I've always done some type of energy work. So I always tell people that if you're not working with somebody that knows energy or knows how to feel it in their body, or you're going to be inviting some things in that you might not
Oh yeah, yeah,
necessarily even know, and you'll know after because you'll get very sick. But like,
yeah.
and I said for me, if you were to work with me, like I'm very aware of all of that stuff. So, and I told her, you don't need to take that if you want to. I always tell people you can do whatever you want to do. Like you want to
Yeah,
take mushrooms and do
totally.
it that way, you do it that way. If you want
Yeah.
to smoke marijuana to get to yourself that way, then you do that. You know what I mean? Like you do whatever you want to do. With me, I don't do any of that. So I
Mm,
already have a huge history of using like alcohol
yeah.
as, depressant. I don't need to add or be I don't need to be codependent on any type of substance. I'm perfectly fine with learning those lessons previously.
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand that because yeah, we come from a line of like alcohol within our family and stuff like that, and
Or drug
it's
use or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's just it's one of those things like you have enough on your plate as a human in the world, kind of dealing with stuff that's going on in your everyday life, let
Yeah.
alone adding on that extra layer of potential danger. Like, let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
Where you don't necessarily have to go through that in order to get the same experience. So it's just a choice. Like, you can choose to do it, obviously.
Right.
But make that choice
Experience it and
informed
see how it
choice.
makes you feel. Yeah. Yeah. I always tell people to experience it, see how it makes you feel. There's people that do mushrooms or there's do other, psychedelics or whatever that don't do it for that a spiritual experience, but
Yeah,
that's what they decide. And that, it kind of makes me feel like when I hear people do that, I'm like, oh God, they know what they're doing. This is not just for fun purposes. They're going to have they're putting themselves into a spiritual awakening that they did not, I guess, didn't ask for.
yeah, and I mean, you think about some of the testing and stuff like that they were doing with even like Agent Orange and like methamphetamine and things like that,
Yeah.
with the armed forces and things, and like some of the stuff that happened to them was horrific.
Yeah.
That accentuated the PTSD that they were experiencing when they came back home, and that sense of disconnection,
Yeah.
because in a lot of ways when I'm kind of going through that altered states of consciousness, there is a certain element where you need to feel obviously safe within your body and grounded within your body and safe that your body is going to be okay where you leave it, kind of thing, and then be able to go to where you need to go and
Yeah.
not get lost on the way and be able to come back home. And that takes skill and practice. And for me, just adding on that other layer of like hallucinogenics just wasn't going to cut it, because then what if something happened and there's this element of although life, you can't control life, but there's this extra, I guess, element to it that I was just like, that's just something that I can't do anymore. Like, it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
It can take you places where you're not necessarily ready to deal with. That's also the other thing as well.
Well, that I was going to say, I'm glad that you said that because I tried to do, I think it was mushroom chocolates or something like that. I
Oh
did it like
wow.
a little bit, yeah, like something like a little piece of it. And it took the edge off of things, but I never
Yep.
really took a whole square or something like that, or it helped like with anxiety, or this was when I first started journeying like a couple of years ago. And then I realized I could probably do this on my own. Because how about if I don't want to see, how about if I see things and then I don't have the tools to, like, I just want
Yeah.
it to naturally, organically happen? Because how about if I didn't have the tools to deal with what I see? Then what does
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
do to my actual current 3D reality? So it's like now I just kind of like, I just decided to do all of the journey and all the meditation and all of that just on my own. And I feel like that has helped so much because I feel like when people tell me their stories about when they took this trip or they took
Yeah.
whatever, and I'm just like, so what do you do with the information when you come back? Like, what are you doing with this? And they're like, I don't really know. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm like confused. I'm like, what? that's not the reason why you do that. I'm like, okay. So they just have it. They just don't understand. And I'm like, oh my God, if I'd seen what I've seen now, current day, a couple of years ago, I would be like coming back with anxiety, probably more PTSD,
Yeah, yeah.
like I didn't really know how to transmute that energy and evolve it to actually heal it. You know what I mean?
Totally, totally. And I think that's the challenge with using, not your own technology that you have, like your
Right.
amazing kind of spiritual technology that you have, not being able to use it and having that extra dimension that you might not necessarily be able to explain. Like you're going out there doing stuff that is pretty far-fetched to like anyone else in the world. Like,
Right.
do you really want to add on that extra layer of the unknown to it?
Right. Yeah.
And then because I'm analytical, so like I come back, I do the thing, I'll be like, okay, so XYZ, blah blah blah, and this is like connect it all together and find the symbolism and all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that thing there would just be the unknown that I just couldn't quite figure out. And so that's one of the reasons why I don't do it. But also I'm just like, I don't really need to see that. Like I don't I just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I can say that my dreams, me personally lately have been, which I know, like I never really was a huge dreamer. I astro travel a lot, but I noticed lately that I've been astro traveling more and dreaming more, just because I wanted more clarity on like just different things or like different, like if I take a
Oh
journey,
yeah.
I wanted more clarity. And I never really felt like I could get that for myself. I always had to go to another psychic or go to somebody else and be like, can you explain this dream or whatever? But now I can just do it on my own. And then it's funny, people come to me, actually, it's not funny, but it's interesting because they'll be like, I had this dream. And they just randomly tell me this and they said it's this, and then intuitively I already know. I'm like, oh, do you want me to help you decode the dream, or you want me to help you connect it? And they're like, yeah, that's why I'm asking. And I'm like, oh, you're asking me. Oh, okay. Like it's just like how it happens. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I didn't realize that I actually could help people uncode their own dreams too, because usually it's something like, my last recent dream was about uh me being eaten and attacked by a shark. It was like
Mm-hmm.
the Jaws, like the movie Jaws. It
Oh
was
yeah.
that shark, but I survived. And then I only my third toe on each one of my foot was missing. So of course,
Oh
me when I
wow.
was looking up, it was very, very clear. And I was like, oh, I have to figure out what this means. And intuitively, I already knew it was about vulnerability, solar plexus. And it was about where I am in my journey right now. But it's like, if people didn't know, had the knowledge to be like, I need to figure out what that dream was, it might frighten them. It might feel like,
Yeah, for
oh, I'm
sure, for sure.
sharks, right? Me, I'm like, I got to figure out what that meant,
Yeah,
and it
no,
was,
I think yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like if you look at, I think even like the evolution of kind of language, like even with the human species and stuff like that, like I mean, the first language was sound, but the second language was like symbol, and it's symbolic in nature. Like it's
yeah,
not the literal kind of figurative thing that we have now. It is very much like a parable. So like you see something like, for example, you might see a red car. That red car might mean something very different to every individual that you ask about the red cars. So someone might mean candy, to another person it might mean like happiness, because it's like a family memory, you used to go in the car all the time. And so
yeah,
that's the thing about dreams and decoding, or even just visions and stuff like that. Like it's not as literal as it seems. It's all symbolic, because that's actually the language that the brain and vision and intuition speak in. Um, and that's I think probably one of the most amazing things. And walking this path for me anyhow is, like you say, like for me a lot of my life was like out looking in, like who can help me to figure this out, who can I turn to help me with this. Whereas now it's kind of the other way around, where I'm like, okay, so there's something that's going on in my life, how can I be resourced with what I have now to figure out what's going out. So it's like a journey of empowerment in a way, and sovereignty, because you're relying on your own resources, and everyone has it. Like everyone's intuitive, everyone has this skill. It's just a muscle that needs to be built up over time,
right.
and everyone has the capacity to use it. And that's the same thing with symbolic sight. Like once we discover what these symbols are for ourselves, we basically build up this like lexicon of symbols, and then we can see things and we're like, okay, and then all of a sudden it puts together a story and we can figure out what our dream means to us. And a lot of the times, which is really interesting, like, there'll be the spanner in the works and it just means nothing. It's just when you're basically had way too much stress going on during the day and you just need to like data dump it all when you're sleeping at night.
Yeah.
And to know the difference, the difference between those kind of dreams as well. So it's amazing. Like it's a work in progress skill.
Yeah.
Kind of walking this path, but it's a really empowering path. And I think after time, what generally happens is they call it walking. It's walking the middle path, and so it's like a razor thin kind of pathway, like a sword, and you're basically walking down, the edge of a sword. And because generally what happens is over time, you develop this kind of certain sense of like gnosis and internal power and empowerment, that certain things that you would not tolerate before become very, very intolerable. And so after a while, that's what's called walking the middle path or the razor's path. It's like your tolerance to the certain types of bullshit that you used to tolerate before just don't exist anymore. And so you kind of walk this middle path when, you just stay in your own lane kind of thing. And you're doing your own thing. And you're not bothered about, the externalities of the world, because the world and the collective is really magnetic and it wants to pull you back into the drama. And so individuation is a really important thing, but it's something that you have to keep continuing to do, because the collective is really magnetic and it really wants to draw you back into its kind of reality. And so that's, I think, the fascinating thing about it as well, is that it's a constant evolution, and it's a constant change and growing with it and kind of becoming masterful and refining your skills and, figuring out where the bullshit lies within your own kind of field, and then kind of eradicating it and creating harmony and justice and integrity and stuff. So, I don't know about like any of your viewers or even anyone else, but like my role models growing up, they weren't necessarily the best role models in how to live a life of integrity, how to live a life of authenticity, speaking your voice and saying what is on your heart and having feelings and being okay with them. So it's something that in a sense, we've all had to like unlearn and relearn. And I guess that's probably the challenge of, the 21st century, is still having kindness and compassion for yourself while you're going through that and unlearning it actively and, relearning how to essentially be kind of a whole person and expressing all of who you are and not being afraid of doing that. It's fascinating journey.
I was gonna say, most of the listeners that are listening or even watching, they kind of live the same. I want to say they resonate with the same idea, just because depending on wherever if they just started in their journey or they've been in their journey for years. But I do, one of the things I've just because I was curious of why people were attracted to me, like when I to ask them, like, what do you see in me that like maybe I didn't see in myself? Like that's pretty much what I was like asked.
Oh yeah.
And they said that you live in integrity and you're very authentic. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I was thinking and asking myself, like, how did I do it so I can help other people do it? Because the 6'2" and human design 6'2" profile of me is like that teacher. So it's like, how can I, because people ask me, how can I do what you do? And I'm like, well, you won't do exactly what I do, but you'll do something that's aligned with you. So we got to figure it out. Obviously, it starts with, when I'm either astrology or their human design chart, right? So, it's interesting to see that I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of human design charts. And actually, at the end of the day, when people are like, I want to have a soul-driven business, or I want to be an inspiring entrepreneur, or whatever it is, like I want to start doing something that's aligned with my soul. at the end of the day, I always say, like, all of us do something very similar. We're helping people, helping people with, maybe, like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're helping somebody with their emotional blocks, or it's a money block. Like, that's the only two, I feel like that's the only two things. And then you're helping, like, shift the energy, right?
Yeah.
Or, you don't need to be a healer if you want to do this. And that's kind of
Mhm.
what I want to segue into, how you became an archetypal web designer. Like, how did that come up with all of the things that you do, and how do you kind of integrate the shamanism into, like, how you help entrepreneurs?
Yeah, sure. So it's been, I guess, I think one of the things that I probably want to preface out there to anyone that's like looking at being an entrepreneur, or starting an entrepreneur, or is on their journey, is that being an entrepreneur is one of the most challenging spiritual kind of rites of passage that anyone will ever undertake, because what is designed to do in some ways is to really look at the patterns that you have around money, around worth, and around value. And those are really important things in the internal life, but they're also in some ways very distorted out in the collective. And so one of these journeys that I've kind of discovered when I was going through this is that there is a lot of challenge around money, value, and worth, because of the upbringing that I have and the certain kind of experiences that I've had, and then being able to charge what is reasonable out in the marketplace. And so those can be really challenging, because you have to dig underneath all of these patterns and behaviors that you have, these kind of mindsets that you have. And it's really challenging doing that as an entrepreneur, trying to run a business, trying to make money, and also uncovering all of this kind of like, that's underneath the surface. So it's challenging, but it is totally rewarding, because the reality is that every human that is on the planet has something to offer, and something exceptionally unique that is a mix of their life experience, their previous experiences, and the way that they think, their skills and abilities that they've acquired over time. And this is one of the things that I've noticed with myself, is that because of my analytical nature, I love technology, because I understand the sequence and the process and the language and how it works. Always be fascinated with it, just know how it kind of intricately works. At the same time, a lot of my work has been working with people. Obviously, I've come into the kind of shamanism realm and worked with shamanism, teacher plants, also kind of like Reiki. There's a lot of different modalities and stuff that I've taught and been taught. And it's fascinating how synergistically it came together in literally like thunderbolt. Where it's just like, why haven't I merged these things, which is like technology and kind of like the energetic realm? Because I've been studying the Hermetic laws as well. And so I was like, how could I do that? And I was like, okay. And because I think quite unusually sometimes, I was like, well, energy is everything, apparently. And I'm an experimenter as well. I was like, well, they all say that energy is everything, because I'm also quite, and sometimes very like critical. Energy is everything. Okay, well, if energy is everything, then that means, what is the internet? And so it got me down this pathway. It's like, what is the internet? As a consciousness, what is it expressing out in the world? And I was like, well, look at it. Like, honestly, it's masculine in its nature. It's got to be, because essentially that was the genesis of it. Came out of a university. And it was basically essentially just like a sharing mechanism between people, and then it just like blew up. And I was like, okay, so it's a masculine kind of consciousness, and it's a consciousness that is everywhere in the world, and its energetic nature is basically a web that covers the world. Okay, well, to me, it seems a little bit out of balance. It's like, well, if that's the case, then what I need to do if I'm going to be involved in that world, I kind of chose something which was essentially a website design, because I've been fascinated with it for ages and I taught myself how to do it. I was like, what if I combine those two things together? The energy and intuition and website design or technology, what if I fuse those things together? And I was like, okay, well, how can I do it? And this is kind of like me thinking that, I'm a human and this is happening. But the reality is it's all up here in source. And, I'm just basically the vehicle. And so essentially that is how archetypal website design was born, via me and spirit saying that because of the overtly masculine nature of the internet, it needs to be harmonized by the opposite, which is the feminine. And so
Right.
I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? Because I'm like, also very practical. I'm like, that's nice to know, but how do I do it? Okay, well, what you need to do is you need to go and get the cards that you have over here, and then you need to start channeling these feminine archetypes into all of the work that you do when you're working on somebody's website. And when it's ready to go, then it'll be basically unleashed out into the world, and it'll start to move out through the internet and start to harmonize the internet. It's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And that's why I do website design in the way that I do. I essentially, now, some of your listeners probably know I'll talk about it in a couple of different ways. So, there's a couple of different layers of understanding to it. But essentially, I'm channeling. And so I'm channeling this feminine archetype, whoever that may be, that comes up. And I'm also, in a way, the channel, the conduit for the archetype, but also for the person that I'm working with and also their business. So there's kind of a couple of different consciousnesses that are coming through. And I'm channeling that into the design and into the kind of layering up of how I work with a website. And then once it's launched, it releases out into the world. And so that's how I came across archetypal website design, because that's basically what I do. For other people, a way to look at it would be to create a feminine energetic signature that encompasses, those three qualities, which is generally I work with women. So, it's the woman entrepreneur or the founder, there's the feminine archetype, and then there's the business consciousness as well, because our business, in a sense, or, the entrepreneurial way that we're going about things, that's a vehicle. So it's a vehicle, and it has its own kind of like dream and vision that's kind of attached to it, and we are helping each other to co-create that reality. And so, yeah, that's kind of synergistically how I came about it. And it's interesting, and I think it's probably because I've worked with intuition. I can generally look at a website and can see the architecture behind it, which I don't know, it's probably just a really geeky thing that I do, but it's energy, like, it's a scaffolding of energy and stuff, and I can tell, like, generally, if something has been created with intention, because intention is everything.
Yeah.
And so I weave the intention into that website when it comes through. And it's the difference of looking at, like, sometimes art, when you see artwork, that's like brilliant and it's got this amazing technical skill and capability to it, but there's just something just seems missing in it, like, and it's the heart, it's kind of like the soul of it. Whereas you'll look at something, maybe that an elephant kind of like undertook and drew, and you'll be like, oh my God, that's like beautiful. It's just like there's such a soul that's encaptured in it. That's kind of intention. That's the difference between those two energetic variabilities, I suppose. In a way, you can sense the intention of somebody before they even walk into the door. And I think that's what I do with websites. I can tell when somebody, just is doing it because they're doing it, or whether someone is like channeling that kind of energy and intentionality into their work. I can't quite define it. And I think it's challenging because, I work in energy and I'm trying to define it in a sense, but it's just different. Like, it feels different and you view it as being different. Yeah, I've released because it's gone through a couple of iterations. So I started to call it intuitive website design, and then it became archetypal website design when I really figured out what the process was and how I was going to do it and replicate it. And I just launched a website just recently, actually, for a client. And like, it's funny. Every time I look at it, I almost cry because I'm just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And then I look at other people's websites and I'm like, oh, I'm sure, like, there's just something in it. Like, there is just something in it. There's a feeling that you get from it, like, any artwork kind of thing. So yeah, that's how I came about it, and that's why I do it in the way that I do. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I've always been very fascinated since I met you. What was it, like, not
Oh
met
gosh,
you,
almost a
but
year
like
ago or something.
it's
Yeah.
been probably like a year and a half, but through I mean, it must have been a mutual friend. Now I can't even remember.
Yeah, it was a Lenny.
Yes, yeah. And I was like, when I heard about you and I like, I was like looking through your stuff, I was like, wow, there's just there's just something that I'm like, I feel like I know her. So we must have been past life something together. Because
Highly likely.
yeah. So because I always just been fat, like, because your idea and what you do and what you've created, there's nobody else on this planet that has ever like created this. And it's just like you know, like I feel like for entrepreneurs, it's already hard enough to be in a space that's very masculine that
Oh yeah.
you doing the website piece. And it's like if this is engagement or whatever it is, like if people just had this website and they got on podcasts or they were on the internet, like somebody to just look at their website and realize like they don't need to really market themselves. It's all there. It has all the components, all the things.
Hmm.
So I often think that people, and for whatever reason, I don't even know why society tells you this, but it's like, I need to build a website. And it's just like, well, sure, a website is where everybody, but you don't need to have a website to be an
No, you
entrepreneur,
don't.
right?
No, no, not at all. Yeah.
But I feel like if you had one place that people could go to and, look at all your stuff and it's all like synchronistic together and it's
Hmm.
by you, I feel like it's just so much different. It's very, I can even look at people's websites or just their content. I can even look at their content and be like,
Yeah.
did they just do this because they had to, or they just do this because they had to? And it's not that I'm being judgmental about it. It's all of like, what was their intention of doing this? Like, why did they make this? Or
Hmm.
are they just doing this because it's that like lack mentality, or if it's like, this is what I want to
Yeah,
do.
totally, totally.
That's why I do not create anything. I don't care
Once
how
you're
much
in a
I feel
good
like I need
frame
to
of mind.
create, unless I feel like it's going to come from a place of like my sacral energy. If not,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to be like so mad that I have to make this, or, the world is going to see, this doesn't feel right. Like I feel like
Yeah,
that is
totally, totally.
I infuse my own energy into everything I do. So yeah.
Well, there's this kind of maxim, I guess, if we're talking about like magic and stuff like that. Like every every magical act is intentional, or every intentional act is magical.
Yeah.
You can kind of say it both ways. Like that is really because in essence, when we're talking about energy and we're talking about kind of like sending energy out, and how you can tell when you walk into the room who's in a good room, who's in a good mood, and who is not, because you can essentially feel it before you walk in. That's
Right.
intention in a way. And so
Yeah.
you can feel when people maybe don't really want to be there, they just want to kind of sit in the corner and stuff like that. It's the same with anything that you do, like social media. There is a presence or an intention behind it, intentionality behind it, that actually emits far further than you could even imagine before somebody even like reads what is going on. And it took me a really long time, I think, to realize that, which is interesting because I work in the energetic realm. But I think that's also like at large the programming that comes around being an entrepreneur. Like it's all of the shoulds, like you should do this, should do that. Like that is further from the truth if you're talking about energy as everything. What's important is your state of mind and your state of being as you are creating something, because essentially an act of creation in and of itself is a divine thing. It's a divine child that's been sent out into the world. And that in itself is brilliant, and it doesn't need anything to kind of fuss it up, kind of thing. Like you just send it out into the world. And I think that's the shift and the change that we are seeing with business, with entrepreneurship and so forth like that. We're seeing this real, it's not like a struggle, but it's like this, what are we letting go and what are we moving towards? Like, what are we clinging on to and what are we moving away from to kind of move towards and creating in the new. It's really pioneering times for being an entrepreneur in the kind of 21st century, because everything is up for redefinition. Because many of the systems, the processes, the sequences, the ways of being aren't very kind to humans or the planet or everything that's on the planet, or even in the kind of atmosphere and the galaxy and stuff like that, like cosmos, like it's just not fit for human consumption kind of thing. And so we need to reevaluate these things that we have and recontextualize them for how we want to, live with integrity and authenticity in our life, in every facet of our life. That includes our business. And so for a very long time, when I first started out, I had a lot of resistance to a lot of ways, I guess, tactics, strategies, especially when it comes to marketing and stuff like that. Where I was just like, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do it. I tried it, didn't like it, I'm not going to do it again. And one of the things that I really struggled with was the ways in which business is defined as successful, which is generally comes down to, numbers. And so because of that, like it's an accounting formula, I'm like, oh God, that's just like, we need to get rid of that. And so because of the way that I kind of think, and I'm like, how can we make this like more, amenable to kind of humans? I'm like, why don't we just count something different? And so instead of like metrics, i.e. finances, the bottom line kind of thing, I was like, why don't we measure impact? And I was like, is there like an impact metric that we can have somewhere? And I was like, no, okay, well, fine, I'll create one. And so I did, and I created this metric that measures impact over, a certain period of time with a particular maxim. I think, I can't remember the guy, he's really famous, and I'll probably try and remember him, but he's essentially like, you are the sum of the 5 most closest people to you. I think he's like he's a life coach or something that's based in America, and he came up with this really interesting quote. And I was like, okay, well, what if I use that? So like there's this, there's a client that I work with, which is 1, and then there's 5 people around them, and their change and transformation affects them. It ripples out to them, ripples out to 5 people. And then there's another layer that happens, which is another 5 people. And so it worked out to be a ratio of 1 to 25. So for every 1 person that there is a change or transformation, it generally ripples out to 25 other people. And that's only 2 layers out. Like if you actually think of it exponentially out into the world, like that's how one individual's change of consciousness can ripple out and affect the whole entire like universe. It's through that particular framework. And I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting. And so that's kind of something that I use in my business, is measuring impact as opposed to, measuring kind of bottom line. There's just different ways of doing things. And, success is another really interesting word that I think everyone as an entrepreneur needs to define for themselves on their own individual terms. Because collectively, it's not a very nice definition.
It's how much money. Yeah, I've actually, like, in the lens of human design, like my signature would be success, but it's like, I had to define success, what it meant for me, because success was not making $1 million. Success was not having $1 million in my bank account. The success, like what success means for me, is how much have I impacted others, like, or how much have I helped others, also helped myself, because if I'm helping others, I'm also helping myself, because like I always say, my biggest when I feel successful is how I like help other people,
Yeah, totally, because there's a reciprocity that occurs in that relationship.
Right. Yeah. So when people look at it from like that lens, or like that way, and like that like perspective, I feel like you will help you'll make way more like money if you look at it from that way, versus like, because if energy is just money, that ends, you know what I mean? Like, people don't end, like that. You can help 25 people and they can all pay you $5,000 each. But if you look at like, $5 million or $1 million, like that ends, like that eventually you got to spend that money, you know what I mean? So I always like help people like look, because I know, when they see the dollar amount on like, oh, I want $1 million, but it's just like, are you going to chase after that money versus helping people? Because in the meantime, you you have to sell things. Like, and that's another thing too. And I have like help people understand is if you don't like to sell things, then you'll never make money because you have to sell things. Like when you go on Amazon or you go on different websites, they're selling things to you. It's just a way of their
Totally.
marketing, their messaging.
Yeah.
So I always tell, and even me, I had to get really good at my messaging, really good at my marketing because that's
Yes.
what sells. It's not whatever. The transformation is what selling. And it's like in the online space, I've been taught to just point out people's symptoms or point out people's
The
like
pain points. Yeah.
anxiety or say, I do this, this, and this. It's just like, I believe, and the same thing with like my own mentor that has helped me through this like transformation. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what you do. They just want to know what you could do for that. Like that transformation,
Yes.
and you have to be very clear about it. And that's been transition, like that's been a whole transformation for myself because my brain was wired completely different. Because I've been,
Yeah.
I've been in network marketing. I've been in like I've been in that industry and networking since I was like 18, and it was all about. It was never taught to me what is the transformation that you can put out. It's like
Yeah.
you have to be able to trigger something in them so they can be like, I want to listen to what she has to say. She's talking to me. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. It's that the sales psychology that kind of comes around it.
Yeah.
Which is I think that's probably, yeah, that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for, like being an entrepreneur, is being curious. I think that's probably a really interesting thing, is being curious and knowing where these patterns of behavior come from. Like
Yeah.
sales psychology, that was basically born out of terrible, out of the tobacco industry.
Oh, really?
Because what essentially what it was is back in I think it was the 1920s or the 1950s, I can't remember where it was, but like smoking was considered a masculine thing. It's a masculine activity. Women didn't do it. Women didn't smoke. It was very rare for women to smoke.
Yeah.
The tobacco industry was just like, dude, we're missing out on like 50% of the population. We need to figure something out so that we can get the rest of the world involved in this thing. And so that's essentially sales psychology was born out of that, was born out of the, in some ways, like the manipulation or the psychology around women having access to this and not seeing it as a masculine derived activity. It's brilliant in the way that they conducted it. I think it happened in New York during a parade or something like that. There was a woman that was smoking it and she looked amazing. I've seen the photos and stuff of it. And they were talking about, how it's just like feminism and she's fighting back and all this stuff. And it was the language and the messaging around it. And then that kind of bore this, kind of marketing, as we see. I think people sometimes call it bro marketing or persuasion marketing, kind of thing. So yeah, it's when you look at the genesis of certain things, it gives you a lot more understanding about how it's, created and been evolved over time and how people use it now. It's really, really helpful, especially in the entrepreneurial space when you look at things like money, because money, business in and of itself, it's essentially a need and a want, and a transaction occurs in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
And
I love it.
So,
I love that you say that. I hopefully, when people are listening to this, they look at their entrepreneur business as that, because I feel like when I'm working with entrepreneurs, because that's pretty much who I work with, or even myself, I always, that part was hard for me. Like, how can I get, like, obviously, I have tangible products to sell, but what would be that non-tangible, like the service part of that transaction that you say? And it's like looking at it from that place. It's like, you obviously, when I help people with their businesses or if they want to start a business, so what service are you going to provide? Because we're not doing pyramid schemes here. You have to sell something. If it's your service, if it's, whatever it is, create something, because if you don't have a tangible product like a book, but if you need a book or you need something to sell, then how are they going to continue to work with you? Like, how are you going to get them to continue to pay you? And it's like, in a perspective of like not trying to take their money. You obviously have to create value, and they need to see the value in what if you're saying your program or you created a program is $1,500, or if that feels safe, because other people ask me too about, well, how do I price my programs? I'm like, I personally tried market research. I've tried to look at other things. I was like, but don't do that. Because I've noticed when I tried to do that, I would compare myself, and then it
Oh
would be like,
yes,
is
yep,
that worthy? As if that's not worthy, is it, all that stuff. So it's like, I've learned you can do that to see what everybody else is, but as long as you have a boundary with yourself to make sure that you're going to charge whatever feels, good for
yep,
you. And don't try. And I always tell people too, like, my own mentor reminded me, stop doing market research because you know your worth, and then
yep,
charge a little bit more, because that's
mm,
going to be that uncomfortable feeling of, I don't want to charge that because I feel like it's not valuable, but that's just what your wounding is telling you or your ego is telling you, So it's like, that's where you're going to feel the most, because for
mm,
me, I love helping people, guiding people, whatever, like whatever I'm doing. But I feel like I sometimes there's a period that I have all of these clients and they pay a little bit amount. And then I have 5 clients and they pay me what I actually want to get paid. And I'm now in that
mm-hmm,
space of like, I'm not going to leave from that space because that's where I feel that energy is worth the most. And then I
yep,
can do other things that I want to do. And I'm not serving so many people because that will shift too, like through a different cycle
yeah,
or
it does.
thing that shifts. And then I feel like now that I've been on this cycle of doing that, I feel like I can serve, I can show up on my podcast. I can show up in my daughter's life. I can show up
Mm-hmm.
in my own healing, and I can show up in my, in my relationships, like with family or friends. And I'm not draining my energy with my business. It's working for me versus before it would work against me constantly.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's one of those kind of, I guess, cyclical journeys that you go through as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You kind of like you have this big, amazing vision, like at the start, I'm going to change the world kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, like I can hardly like change my mindset, like let alone change the world. Like, how am I going to do this? And you
Yeah.
go through a lot of different, I guess, growing pains as an entrepreneur, because
Yeah.
essentially you're growing your own kind of like integrity and authenticity. You're growing your own voice. You're growing what you'll tolerate, what you won't tolerate.
Yeah.
What your uniqueness is in the world. Like the reality is I was really funny with like niching and stuff. I was like, I don't want to do the niche. And then it was like, well, technically my body of work, which is kind of what I call all of the things that I do, like my body of work, like there is no one else that has the life experience that I have. There is no one else that talks the way that I do. There is no one else that does XYZ the way I do. Like I am the niche, I am the one. And what I need to do in some senses, you come to this kind of, and it's like a confidence in your own abilities. And
Yeah.
from that confidence, your kind of strength and your internal, I guess, gnosis and wisdom and understanding, and in some senses, like audacity grows from that, because you're like, yeah, I know who I am, and
Yeah.
I'm okay for it to be out there in the world. And that's when things start to snowball. Like when you go through those initial growing pains, they're like really full on. But once you start to kind of grow in confidence in your own abilities and the fact that you're actually an amazing human being out in the world, like, we're all going through this thing called life together. Um,
Right.
and we're all changing and growing and evolving. But at the same time, we're all unique in the perspective of the world. And I think that is the thing that, I would endeavor people to kind of harness. Like, there is no one like you, and there will never be anyone like you. I mean, you
Right.
know that from working with astrology, with natal charts. Like, there is
Yeah.
no one else like you.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just how can we, in some senses, get out of our own way and allow for that kind of, that conduit, that channel, that kind of access to source, creativity, intuition, however you kind of want to talk it. Like, how can we allow that to flow through us? And that, in some senses, and is intentionality. It's divinity. People connect on lots of different levels when they talk to people. You can connect on an egoic level, which is very superficial. You can connect on a soul level, you can connect on a spirit level. Like, there's lots of different layers of communication. And I think when you come at an entrepreneurial journey, you kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of I'm confident in my ability to deliver what I need to do, and I know what my message and my story is. People feel that, like, no matter where you go, and when you talk about it.
Right.
Because a lot of the times I used to have be challenged articulating kind of like the benefits, of my work. And I'm just like, I'm just going to talk about what I do. I think that kind of says it.
I definitely can
Yeah.
resonate. I definitely can. I feel like there's people listening to this that could resonate with that too. And I definitely can, especially being, newer to entrepreneurship, like, somebody that's been in it, nobody in my family was an entrepreneur. I didn't grow up in business. I didn't even know. I always felt like, do I need to have a marketing degree? Like, do I need to go to college for business? And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I don't do any of that. Like, I can just, you know, obviously I needed to teach myself, how to have a business, or like I needed to, obviously, because, there's laws and stuff that I need to abide by, and taxes I need to pay, and all the
Yes.
things, all that stuff. But like, besides that, I feel like there's even people, I'm like, I don't even need to teach myself all of that stuff, because there's people that actually do all of that stuff. So it's like, I just need to, hire them, or like get their information, or like have a conversation with them. And I do also like that too, because I feel like entrepreneurs I feel like I had to know everything, and I didn't. Like, I just kind of used my intuition to guide me through. I have to say, like, through, I guess it's been, 4 years now, I kind of realized from the start of my journey till like right now, this past year was probably the biggest year that I've had, like, in income wise, because I had to, now knowing who I serve, and, my own coach had told me that I need to niche down, because I was now, because it's like, you need to know who you're speaking to. And now that I've been clearer, I can help anybody really, but who I've helped this last 4 years have been people wanting to start a business, or they're already entrepreneurs. So obviously that is the people that I'm speaking to. And I feel like when I make content, or I'm speaking, it's very clear about who, I'm speaking to, versus when somebody's reading a piece of content, or somebody wants to be on the podcast, somebody that is not an entrepreneur, or maybe they're in their healing journey and they want to be an entrepreneur or whatever, we're going to have a very different conversation. It's like, I feel like the mission about my podcast has always been to give people a safe space to talk about who they are, or speak about, what they do, because I feel like there's not a lot of safe spaces for that. I do like that. I do know that. And I guess when I first started the podcast, Spirit had said, you need to have podcasts. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. Like, who wants to just listen to me talk? Like, but then I realized, oh, it's not just me. It's to give somebody else, like, give other people a space to talk about, who they are and what they do and how they can help. Because I feel like that type of community, like, is like the best community, because it could be whoever, like, around the world,
Yeah.
And if it's just like that one person that needs help with, at the end of the day, you could help with many things, right? But it's like the main thing is, like, if somebody's listening to this and like, I need somebody to help me with a website. I want like my website to be, because I really truly believe there's plenty of people, there's tons of people in this world that really think that, like, a website, and it could change their whole demeanor of their, like, business. Because people say that to me all the time, well, I have to create a website. And I'm like, but why don't you start creating this first, and then create the website, and then all come together, right? Because I'm like, you don't need to do it. There's people in this world. And I always think of you when people say that to me. I'm like, I actually have somebody I can connect you with, but start here first. Like, that's how I am. I'm always at the finish line or the middle, and I haven't started. It's always like, I'm always out here, I gotta go.
That's a huge business misnomer, that you need a website. That's actually extremely untrue in this day and age. What you actually need is a product to sell. That's what you need.
Right.
In a way to message it to people, i.e. some platform that you can talk to somebody on, and a way to take money. That's all you need to do to have a business. You don't need a website, people. Like, I've actually said that to a few people. I'm like, okay, so, kind of, what are you looking for? Oh, I just want to, no, this is not going to help. This is busy work. You're actually distracting yourself from the real task at hand, which is figuring out what you want to create, what you want to sell, who you're going to talk to, and how you're going to take money from somebody, in order for the transaction to kind of go through. Like, that's what you need to have a business. You don't need a website. That comes further on down the track. You know, because the other thing as well is like a lot of people don't understand websites take a lot of work to maintain. Like it's
Yeah.
not a one and done thing. You have to constantly update and, you know, work on them and edit them and stuff like that. Like, so that's also something that I don't think people know as well. Like it takes constant maintenance and updating.
Yeah.
And that's after, you know, for example, when I first started my journey like 5 years ago, and I taught myself how to design websites, I put up my first website. Oh my God, I'm on to my 7th now. Like, and that's because I know how to do it. But like, imagine if that was somebody that I handed over a website and they reiterated their kind of entrepreneurial journey and their messaging 7 times. That would just be like painful.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
I
so
would say that
find out, kind of, you know, give yourself a bit of experimentation, because generally what happens is as individuals, you know, we go broad and then we start to refine.
yeah.
And that's experimentation. Experimentation is broad. Find out what you like, find out what you don't like. You know, you kind of come together and then you find the sweet spot in your life and in your entrepreneurial journey. You know, what you're known for, what you love to do, what brings you passion, and also what is something that somebody is going to, create a transaction for you to, you know, create an investment. Also monetary kind of reciprocity that goes with it. Like that's more important than a website. It's more important than a course platform if you're not going to be running courses. Like I had a mentor and she was just like, I don't even understand like the things this day. Like I just had a PDF sent to somebody with a link and that was how they paid me. I'm like, there you go. Like it can be really simple when you want it to be. It's just there's a lot of complexity in the business world that's unnecessary.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say the pain that you speak about a website. I guess it's been 2 years ago that I have I have my domain, my actual website,
Yeah.
but I just attach it to my memberships, or if it's like a landing page that I have. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize the terminology of a landing page is the same thing as a website. So it's like I learned different things and people have taught me different things. And I realized, I thought that in order to sell my book, I was told, or I thought I obviously heard it completely wrong, that I needed to have a website. So then I invested money into like a design brand,
Mm-hmm.
and she made a website for me. And of course, like I, trusted her guidance. And then she did my website. It was all pretty and all the things. And then when I would ask her different stuff, it was like she was like gatekeeping stuff. And I was like, oh God, I don't
Oh
think this
yeah,
was the
that's not
right
cool. Yeah.
way. I didn't think this was the right way to do it. Like, of course, I had my book, I had, my authors, but I never really had the first part of it. It's like if somebody would have just told me, I need a product, I need a way for people to pay me, and I need some type of whatever to, like I needed my platform, which I have my social media. So,
Yeah.
and that's all I need. It could be however however it was. I didn't need this whole website. And it was like, I would spend hours trying to figure out this website, or, when
Yeah. Yeah.
back end stuff, which I have the experience of. Like, if I had to build a website for somebody, I could do it. Do I
Yeah.
want to? Absolutely not.
No.
No, you could never, I couldn't even tell you a price that it would even make me want to sit and build one, but it's like, I have that experience when people say I need this or no, I'm like, no, you don't. You have a product, right? If you don't have a product, you need some type of,
You need to go find one.
some
Yeah.
type of like place for people to buy it, or some type of like membership platform that they could buy your courses on,
Yeah.
and then how they can pay you or whatever. I was like, I think do not spend that. I was like, it was a lot of money that I
It is a
wasted.
lot of money. And it's a lot of money to invest in a time too, because it's
Yeah,
generally a 4 to 6 to 8 week kind of like build time. You've got all the stuff before it, the stuff after it. Like
yeah,
it's a huge investment in time, energy, and resources. And if
yeah.
you're at the very beginning of your journey, it's most likely almost like 99.9% not actually necessary.
No,
You just need to figure out in some ways, and I mean it sounds really like really simple when I say it out loud, but it's not. You need
right,
to find out who you are and what you have to offer to the world.
right.
And that's challenging because on some levels you need to go through that kind of entrepreneurial like death in a way, like the death
Right.
of what society thinks
Yeah,
is an entrepreneur is, and
yeah,
find out what it means for you to be an entrepreneur. because there's lots of different kinds of entrepreneurs, and there's lots of different ways that we all do business. But, simplicity, pull it down to simplicity. You need a product, you need some way to talk to people, and you need some way to take their money. And that could be any variety of different ways, but simplicity, it's the best way. And 3 is always easy because it's like easy to remember.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah.
you need. Like, keep it simple because there's enough going on in everyone's life without complicating it.
Yeah. And I really wish, I was going to say, I always think back now that that was a lesson I obviously needed to learn that I don't need to learn ever again. But I always thought that integrity, I just always felt like the girl that did this, I really wish she would have told me, because I guess it's because I stayed in integrity. If I'm not going to take somebody's money, even if it's thousands of dollars, if I know that I'm not going to, by the end of the time working together, I'm not going to, they're going to be investing money that they don't have, or maybe they can go invest in something else, like where it's going to benefit their business or the return on their investment.
Totally,
I don't know. I just never, I don't care who they are. I have turned down people that wanted to pay right then and there. I just knew that I couldn't serve them and what they needed. I would refer them out or whatever, even if it is my coaching program. I'm not just going to take people's money to take it. It's just not what I do. And I just feel like I've learned that lesson probably from her, because I realized she was a newer entrepreneur and I feel like she thought that she could help me, but there was different red flags that I should have completely the universe was showing me, stop. You need to stop. Regardless if you signed this contract, you need to stop. And it was like, it wasn't adding up, and things just weren't, weren't amicable, and things just weren't aligning, that I should have just pulled away. You know what I mean? But I didn't, because I felt like this contract binded me into, all of that stuff. And I just feel like, I even contracts keep us, in that, like,
it's kind of like accountability almost.
Right. But at the same time, if somebody came to me and said, I can't do this anymore, I don't have the funds, some dramatic life experience happened, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. That's fine.
Yeah, totally. And that,
yeah,
that's interesting you bring that up, because in some relationships, if we're just talking about relationships, let alone business relationships, when there's transactions occurring of money, like there can be this power differential, or this kind of, if you're talking about it for your example, this integrity differential, where because I act and behave in a certain manner, there is almost this expectation that the other person will act and behave according to those same standards. That's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true in the wider world, let alone in the business world. Yes. And I think that's a lesson that I learned as well too, to be honest with you. And I'll give kind of an example. So I was very beginning of my kind of entrepreneurial journey when I was building a website for somebody, because I came across intuitive website design and I was building it for her, and she got sick, like really sick. And I was just like, look, what I'll do is I'll put it on hold. Like, I understand that you're going through like really intense, like kind of personal stuff at the moment. I'll just check in sporadically, like every, I think it was like every 3 months or something. Like, this was like a 2.5 year kind of like journey with this one client that I had. So I'll check in with you, see how you're going, like just because she was quite sick. And I said, and when you're able to, and when you're ready, come to me and we'll just make it happen. Yeah. If not, then I'm happy to do whatever we need to do to kind of make this like equitable, and she popped up kind of, I think like last week or something, going, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, are you feeling better? Is everything okay? Do you want to move forward with the website? She's like, yeah, I'd really like to do it. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's get into it. And this is like a very long time ago. But that's part of, I guess, the integrity component that I had, where I was like, you paid for what you paid for. Unfortunately, we weren't able to deliver it because of, your personal circumstances.
Right.
I'm still around, you're still around. Let's just work it out. Yeah. And then also there's been other times that I've just like, we actually just need to discontinue this relationship because it's not actually working.
Right.
And there's too much expectation on one side and not enough kind of thing on the other. And so you know, you learn these sort of things because the reality is it was just learning how to be in relationship with people as well, let alone when you throw money in, you know, that goes a whole nother kind of like, you know, ball in the air kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's all a learning experience, you know, it's all learning. And when we come out the other side, you know, we obviously have more wisdom about it and we're like, okay, well, I won't do it that way this time and I'll just
Not going
figure
that
out
way.
a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I think being an entrepreneur, it's it's really rewarding because I think of the spiritual kind of personal transformation that occurs for me anyhow. Like I've just loved the person that I've turned into, and the trials and tribulations on the way and the heartbreaks and all of this kind of like death and things like that. Like I wouldn't be who I am now without going through that. So I'm grateful for it. But at the same time, there's this kind of, you know, you need to be really kind to yourself as well when you're going through these like ego deaths, these kind of like transformations and stuff like Dark Night of the Soul vibe. Because you've never been here before, you know, and you've just got to have a little bit of kindness, a little bit of nurturing and nourishing for yourself, and you know it'll be okay. Talk to people that can help you, you know, that you trust, that you rely on, that aren't judgmental. Sometimes it helps to have another like business buddy that you can talk to, or even just like, you know, friends that don't have a business that can just have your back.
Yeah.
It's important to find people who care about you and uplift you on your journey so that when, you know, maybe the roles are reversed, that you can help them on their journey as well, because you know we're all going to get there together.
Yeah. I definitely resonate with having a business buddy. And I
Yeah.
always felt like, you know, if I could give the value, like the energy, people always say, well, you know, I have all these people that I know, but I feel like, you know, if I'm not the energy exchange, I'm like, well, the energy exchange doesn't need to be money. If it's mutual
No,
between
it's
you and
time. Yeah.
yeah, like I'm, you know, I have a friend that we meet like weekly right now,
Yep.
to like just basically check in with each other and like support each other and like whatever we need at that hour that we, obviously it's very, you know, scheduled and contained because
Yep.
we both have stuff going on, but you know, and of course like texts throughout here and there, or like, you know, but it's like more of like whenever she can get to it, or if I need like advice, or if it's like an old mentor. And I do that stuff too with my clients. Like I always say, like, just because you are not paying me in a container and doesn't mean that you can't ask for advice. Now if it's
Yeah,
like
totally.
every single day, that's a little bit different. We got to put you into like a membership container or something like that. But you know, that would just, to me, I always feel like you just need more my guidance. And I want to make sure that I have you in a container that I can give you a guidance more regularly versus,
Mhm.
you know, here or there check-ins, you know. And I always tell people that too. Like, I always want you to check in with me. I always want you to tell me what's going on in your life because I'm interested, you know. It doesn't mean that you know, because I feel like a lot of people that have worked with you or have worked with other, you know, spiritual mentors or whatever, that they feel like they can't ask them questions. And I'm like, well, for me,
Yeah.
I can just speak for myself. But I feel like a lot of us that are in integrity, that are like just genuinely curious, like I don't feel like it matters. Now, if you're trying, there's a difference between trying to suck our energy versus we can
Yeah.
feel. So
Yeah,
that's
totally.
but again, I was like, but again, you know, when I allowed people to suck my energy or to take all my energy, that I was like, God, I feel exhausted by Friday, you know, and I said, that's their own boundaries. And I'm, of course, you know, through my own evolution, I had to learn
Yes.
boundaries are really important because
Mm-hmm.
people are going to continue
Push
to
up
test
against
those
them all the
boundaries,
time. Yeah.
right? You know, so yeah, I always feel like the whole your advice on like the buddy thing is you need somebody. You need at least not five people. You just need one person, you know,
No, you
like
need at least
that you
someone.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes that will change. Like I've had, you know, I've only one time, but like I've had a couple different, you know, business buddies that I thought, you know, were friends, but they weren't. You know, they were only
Mm-hmm.
when I stopped paying them or we stopped working together, it was like that energy exchange that they needed. And I was like, well, I guess this is just the end of this relationship. And I just had to release it with love, you know, because
Yeah. Yeah.
like that was the end of, I guess, that lesson, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, the other people that I, like stay in communication with, it's not like that. But I feel like, if you're intuitive, like very intuitive and connected with your intuition, you just know. You just
Yeah, you
know
do,
that
you
as
do.
soon as you stop paying that person, you might not feel like you can reach out for support or whatever, And that's
Totally, totally.
just, that's the unfortunate part of the business world. But I mean, that's what people decide, right? So
Yeah, yeah, true. It's fascinating actually how you talk about like a buddy system kind of thing. So I'm in like a business accelerator at the moment, and so part of this business accelerator is something called the Power 150, and I'll talk about it in here because I think it's actually really important. So there's a gentleman that did some research, a sociologist, I think it is, by the name of, I think, Andrew Dunbar. It's called the Dunbar number. So it's essentially as an individual, like we can hold, nourish, and nurture at a maximum 150 relationships. Now, in this business accelerator, what we have is essentially I have a spreadsheet, not a spreadsheet, but I have like a form, and I have up to 150 people on this form. And then there is, when I connect to them, and you need to connect with these people like at least every second month. So like every 2 months, you're connecting with them. And creating this kind of meaningful relationships in our life. And these are people that I've met like through the workplace, that I've met like 10, 20, 30 years ago, that I still stay in touch with, their family, their friends. I think even as an entrepreneur, like, or even as as a person, like having at least like 50, of these kind of meaningful relationships that you nourish, that you nurture, that you connect with on a regular basis does wonders for not only your kind of like mental and emotional health, but also it makes you realize that the reality is that we all just want to connect with people that we just find meaningful relationships with, and we want to nourish those kind of relationships. And it reminds us to do that. And I think that's the thing, like when I reached out to a couple of people that I hadn't like contacted in quite some time, I was just like, I was just thinking about you the other day. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, like, and it just starts the conversation. And you don't know what someone else is going through. And it's not until you make that connection in that kind of time and space that you realize, oh my God, we're like walking the same path kind of thing. It's like you're right beside me. And I think that does wonders for like just mental health and emotional health overall, because you realize that you're not an isolated individual in the world, and that there are people out there that find you just as amazing as you find them. And it's really heartening to like, be in that kind of glow, with people. And I think it's really important as an entrepreneur, but also just as an individual in this world, find those people that you resonate with and keep in contact with them.
Yeah,
It's really
I love
important.
that. I love that you say that, because I'm in my own like coaching container. I'm
Mm-hmm.
in a coaching container with my mentor, and there's 3 other girls that are in there. And I often feel like, and one of them actually has said that there's sometimes that I feel so alone. Entrepreneurial
Yeah.
can be so alone because
Mm-hmm.
we're doing it on our own, right? Obviously, like, she has clients and stuff like that. And then, we have bi-weekly calls, like group calls, which I really enjoy because I just really enjoy connecting, not too much in like a big group setting, but like one-on-one,
Yeah.
or if it's like in our Boxer chats or whatever, because I feel like it's just easier to connect with somebody and you feel seen and heard and all that stuff. But
Totally.
yeah, it's definitely really, really important. Even if it's like, I think of, sometimes I'm really bad at this. Like I'll think of somebody and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to message
Oh
them. If
yes.
I don't message them right away, it's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, crap, I didn't message them. Like, or then weeks go by, and I feel like especially social media, it makes it easier to, stay connected with people, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like that. I always like to, like, if I have I always tell people, if you have my cell phone number, text me.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's social media, you can message me, but I feel like that text message, I feel like it's more heart centered, especially when you have their cell phone number or their
Yeah, totally.
nowadays it's like you don't just give out your cell phone number anymore. It's like, oh, go follow me on social media. That's like, that's more of like
It's a bit
the
more intimate.
personal, like a lot of people don't have my message, like my cell phone number, because it's more personal,
Yeah.
than social media. So yeah, I mean, there's my clients have my cell phone number, obviously, because I'm going to answer my cell phone number quicker than I'm going to answer something on social media if I'm not available,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
true.
like to make sure that, and most of the time, to be honest, I tell my clients this all the time. I'm like, make sure you text me if you need me. And it's always, they don't always, I feel like I understand sometimes, like, if it's after 8 to 5 or whatever, and they
Yeah.
don't bother me, but I'm like, you're not bothering me. You're my client. This is what you're paying for. I'm available. If I'm not available, I'm not going to answer until I am available, So
Yeah,
it's
totally,
like,
totally.
that's the whole boundary thing that I always feel bad, because they could be going through something difficult that they need my support with, and they don't reach out. So I'm always like, you need to reach out. It's your job. That is your job in this relationship, to reach out.
Yep. It's
I can
your
only do
responsibility.
too much. Right?
Too
All
funny.
right.
Well, yeah,
So
I mean, it's true. It's very true. Like, that's your part of this relationship dynamic. Is like, if you need help,
this
reach
is your
out.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I have my job and this is your job.
Yeah.
So I know that we had talked about a lot of things, but to wrap back up everything, how can people get a hold of you? I'll make sure that get in contact with you. I'll make sure all of that is in the description box as well. And do
Sure.
you have any offers that you're going to be offering, or that you are going to, do you have a freebie that you can offer the audience?
I do. So the best way to get in touch with me would be via my website, funnily enough, which is alisonhaitana.com, or alternatively, you can find me on Facebook under Alison Haitana, or on LinkedIn under Alison Haitana. And then I also have a freebie. So I have trained as an intentional creativity teacher. So that's part of what I've infused into my work. And one of the kind of little processes that I've done is actually to create an entrepreneurial oracle deck. And so you actually have a coupon code that I'm going to drop in. And if you go onto my course website and put it in, you can actually get it for free. So it's usually 88 Australian dollars. And basically, I show you through the process of how to create your own oracle deck for your kind of entrepreneurial journey. And you can start to, use the symbolism that you come across every day in order to kind of guide you on your journey. It's basically an internal process, externalized. Yeah.
Love that. I'm going to go get my Oracle deck. I didn't even know that you had that. So thank you for giving that to us.
Yeah, no, it's heaps of fun.
That is a very nice, freebie.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
For that.
It's all good.
Yes. So thank you for joining us on today's podcast with Alison on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and make sure you share with somebody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. And make sure you go check in all of her links out in the description box. So stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you are a current or inspiring to be fempreneur, suffering from the fear of being seen and or feel very triggered when you're building your business, reach out to me at The Mermaid Light about my Rich and Resilient Biz Baddies. This is a collective text message Voxer support group designed to help you heal your triggers and turn imposter syndrome into bad bitch energy. If you resonate with our conversations and insight, don't forget to subscribe, rate the show, and leave a review. Your feedback fuels our mission. Remember, your journey to unwavering certainty and purpose is ongoing. So please make sure you stay connected with us on social media. Keep manifesting greatness in your life. Until next time, this is Lauren from the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Stay enlightened, stay inspired, and keep manifesting your extraordinary path.